Hey everybody, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth
on Now You Know.
Okay, so some big news happened last week, and that is that Tesla is going to be building Gigafactory 3 in China.
Yeah.
Now, for the longest time, we didn't want to report on this because it was, in the works.
It was in limbo. Yeah, we didn't know if it was going to happen or not.
Right, and I was afraid that, we're dealing with China here, and no other company has ever been allowed to have a wholly owned factory, and this is a big, big deal. Up until now, if you wanted a factory, you had to partner with China, and you could only have 50% ownership of that factory. The other 50% had to come from Chinese partners. So I kind of thought, there's no way Tesla's going to pull this off.
Mm-hmm.
They did, it appears. They seem to have inked a deal. They're going to be building it in Shanghai, and it's pretty cool. I mean, Elon was on a 3-day tour of Shanghai and Beijing last week. He met with the mayor of Shanghai, Ying Yang, and this could be the largest foreign investment in Shanghai, surpassing Disney's $5.5 billion spent on the Shanghai Disney Resort.
This is, first of all, it's impressive just because of the fact that they're the first to do this, which is in itself impressive. But, there's a whole bunch of reasons why this is amazing.
Yeah. First of all, let's look at China and their EV sales worldwide. Mm-hmm. So in 2017, they took over the number one spot with 1.2 million units of EV sales. And I know that in the scheme of vehicles, this seems tiny, and it is. We're at the beginning of our S-curve, right? Mm-hmm. But it means that China is the place to be in terms of EV sales. That means you've got a huge customer base dying to buy EVs right there in China.
Right.
And if you've got a factory right there, you can directly sell your cars to them. Now, here's the other big part of that, tariffs. Explain to me what's going on with tariffs.
The United States and China are in a trade war currently, and what just very recently happened is that U.S.-made cars went from having a 15% tariff to having a 40% tariff in China.
Now, when we're talking about S's and X's, which are expensive cars to begin with,
right,
you tack on 40%, and you're looking at over $20,000 more for an S or an X in China.
Right, and that's all tariff.
Right. You're not getting more car for that. You're just paying a bigger tariff.
Right. And so if you're able to make the car in China, there's no tariff.
And so basically against your competition, which might have to still keep shipping cars over there, you're going to have a huge lead.
Right.
Now when we get to the Model 3, which they're going to be pumping out of this new Gigafactory 3, that means that car will be much cheaper, and you need it to be cheaper because you're trying to sell it to the middle class. So it's not like they're going to build this factory tomorrow and it's going to pump out cars tomorrow. First of all, they're going to have to build the factory, and so Tesla plans to produce the first cars about 2 years after construction begins on the Gigafactory 3. And once it begins, they will be ramping up to as many as 500,000 vehicles per year about 2 to 3 years after that. So it's going to take a while. This isn't one of those stories that's just going to immediately change the landscape. But the fact that they're getting this process going is huge news, because I thought this was going to happen a few years from now.
Right.
So if you're a Chinese customer right now and you want a Model S or X, there's a wait, right?
Yeah, there is a 6-month wait for a Model S and a 12-month wait for a Model X.
Wow, because they have to ship it from Fremont all the way to China.
Right. And that's quite a backlog. You can imagine if the cars were made in China, that there wouldn't be so much of a wait, and you could make a heck of a lot more of them. I also want to talk about margins. As we all know, making things in China is cheaper because labor is cheaper.
Oh, that's right. So they're going to be hiring Chinese workers for these factories.
Right.
And that's a really important point.
Yeah. I mean, being able to lower your labor costs means that a Model 3, for instance, sold in China, produced in China, is going to be a whole lot cheaper than a United States produced Model 3.
Other cool part about that is that when you're hiring workers in China for your factory, now China has a vested interest in your company. If we look right now at Fremont and Gigafactory, we're talking 30,000 plus employees. These employees would now be in China, and so not as much of an incentive for China to want to do something silly like trying to shut you down, because that means that they'd be taking that huge workforce in Shanghai and laying them off. And you know that there had to be some really amazing back and forth talks, because Shanghai and China did not want to give up on the ownership of the factory.
Right.
And that's why the whole time I was thinking there's just no way maybe they're going to give up a few percentage points of ownership.
Because think about this. Tesla is a teensy tiny company compared to all of its competitors, compared to Daimler and BMW and stuff like that. And so, China didn't budge with any of those other companies in terms of letting them, have their own wholly owned factories.
That's a really good point.
It's amazing that they let Tesla do it, and I think it's because Tesla is wholly EV.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I mean, they bent the rules or made a new rule saying basically if you are building 100% alternative energy vehicles, you could now have a 100% owned factory.
Right.
And since none of the other companies do that, they couldn't build a factory like that.
Right.
And that's another good point you brought up before that, which was that there are, Tesla is just a tiny company in China. There's all the big players, GM, BMW, and so forth, have factories there, billions of dollars of factories, but they're all co-owned by Chinese companies.
Right.
And so when you talk about profit, you're having to share that profit with Chinese companies.
Yep.
Also, you're sharing your technology with them. Mm-hmm. Here, Tesla's keeping all the profit and all the technology in-house.
And just one last point is that you're able to open the door for other car manufacturers to be like, hey, you want to produce electric vehicles in China? You can do that. Build your own factories in China.
Right.
And that's really appealing to a lot of car manufacturers who are actually now starting to think about doing that, especially because they realize that the Chinese market is going to be pushing towards EVs and that there's nothing they can do about it. There's no misinformation. Like, they can't control the Chinese media enough to be able to be like, oh, no, electric cars are bad. Like, they're like, no, we want electric cars.
Right. I mean, this is just another reason to be long on Tesla because they have a very long-range vision and they're carrying out that vision incredibly well.
Yep.
For a startup company, I am super surprised that they were able to pull this together as fast as they were. Because let's not forget, 2,000 days ago, the Model S came out.
It's true.
And no one's come up with competition for it yet.
It's true.
And yet here they are, signing deals with China that have never been done before. I think this shows that China gets it just like Tesla gets it.
Right.
They're both long on the same things that are going to help both Tesla and their own country.
We hope that you enjoyed watching this in depth. If you liked it, hit the like button. It tweaks some numbers in the YouTube algorithm that make it go like...
You're big on the like button.
I think it's important, I guess. I don't know. I wish that...
I think you have a love-hate relationship with that button.
I hate it. I wish you didn't have to click it. I mean, I wish it was just like, oh, I watched the video to this point. That's great. And then YouTube's like, well, they watched the whole thing. They must have liked it.
But they don't know.
They don't know until you hit the like button.
Well, that not yet. They haven't reached inside your brain yet.
No, they're never going to get there.
Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Now you know.